thinking, I think we exhausted Genesis, at least the little section that we that we looked at. And I was visiting with someone about the laments of the Psalms. That I know it's something I haven't looked at in a long time. And so I looked at some of the laments, and this one came up, which is actually not that, but I got into the psalm and really enjoyed what it said. And so we're going to be in Psalm 6 today. Psalm 6 today, and apparently something that it's kind of like Psalm 51 in terms of David pleading with Yahweh to make their relationship good again, which again, it's a lot like Psalm 51. So we'll be in Psalm 6 this morning, and it should give us plenty of material to visit about and walk through. So let's read through this real quick, and then we'll dive into it. And this is a psalm of David for the choir director. O Yahweh, do not rebuke me in your anger, or discipline me in your rage. But have compassion on me, Yahweh, for I am weak. Heal me, Yahweh, for my bones are in agony. I am sick at heart. How long, O Yahweh, until you restore me? Return, O Yahweh, and rescue me. Save me because of your unfailing love. For the dead do not remember you. Who can praise you from the grave? I am worn out from sobbing. All night I flood my bed with weeping, drenching it with my tears. My vision is blurred by grief. My eyes are worn out because of my enemies. Go away, all you who do evil, for Yahweh has heard my weeping. Yahweh has heard my plea. Yahweh will answer my prayer. May all my enemies be disgraced and terrified. May they suddenly turn back in shame. So before we get to looking at this, any initial thoughts as we read through this? Yes, it was. Yes, it was. It was a musical prayer, apparently. And this may seem, kind of, I don't know, not insignificant, but minor. I didn't even mean to do that. But this is apparently something given to the choir director to be played as a song. A psalm of David to be accompanied by an 8-string instrument. So kind of very specific just in the notation above. And as I've listened to some podcasts about some of these Old Testament writings, as far as they know, the as opposed to, like the beginning of a book, really the beginning of any Bible book is not original. For instance, Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles. Chronicles is kind of a collaboration and a different approach than Samuel and Kings. But none of them come with names. Much like the New Testament books. They didn't come with names. The Gospel according to Matthew. It's not only not original, but it was added later because they like titles. These are original. So David writes this. He writes it to the choir director, and he wants it played with a 8-stringed instrument. Anything else that you find interesting here before we get going? Did you count how many? Yeah. Go ahead, Les.
Does it actually call it Yahweh? Because I didn't think they wanted to use his name.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because I looked it up because of this huge curiosity that I have now, and it is actually Yahweh. It's YEHWAH, I think. So, which is very interesting. You might think about a reason why that would be interesting. that he would put that here. What is one of the things that the Israel, they didn't say the name because it was too holy for them to say. And it's Hebrew. There's no vowels in Hebrew.
David had such a personal relationship with God that he felt okay saying it.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that's a lot of it, that he is walking in such a way with Yahweh that he calls him that. Now, another curious thing is it's much like, and I'm really not going to get off on this, but it just really irritates me, is we have, I don't know, probably a dozen, and I can only think of 3 right now, words in our Bibles that aren't actually words, as we call them, transliterations, like angels should be messengers, baptism should be immersion. And even the word deacon is a transliteration. It should be worker or servant. And so this is one of those where we have the word Lord, but the word is Yahweh, which doesn't really matter anywhere other than just knowing it and being aware of it. And it is mentioned 8 times in this psalm. Sometimes it's mentioned within the same verses, and it's almost as if, this emphasis of who he's going to, who is going to provide this restoration for him, who is going to take care of him, and he's very much highlighting who the object of this psalm is. Anything else? So at the outset here, Yahweh, do not rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your rage. Do we know the sin here that David is speaking of? And the answer is we don't. And we can, make observations here and there, but all we know is he has done something that has been in error. And he is going to God about this. Now, I guess it's possible that it could have a connection with Bathsheba, and he wrote more than one Psalm 51s that are kind of scattered throughout. But whatever it is, God is not happy with them. One other note here that doesn't have a lot to do with Psalm 6, and I don't know if you've ever asked this question in your head, but Psalm 1 through 150, they're not chronological. In other words, Psalm 1 isn't first and Psalm 150 last. They're this conglomeration of psalms. And how many psalms did David write? Let me rephrase that question. Not all of them. And if you go through a lot of the psalms, some were written by Asaph, a couple were written by Moses. So you have a lot of authors in the Psalms, but oftentimes in our brains, they're all by David, but we know they're not. And they're also not necessarily in an order. They're in these pockets of books, if you will. Yeah.
No, David did not write all the Psalms, but he did write a majority of them. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that because of David and his relationship with God, because he was a man after God's own heart, I'm going to say, was gifted with the ability to write these songs that we have. Mm-hmm. And they connect us in a way to God that we wouldn't have otherwise had. Yeah. So David is, through the millennia, has done a great service to the Jews and now to Christians. Because of these words that he was inspired to write. And they meet us in different needs at different times of our life. This is one where he's down. Presumably because of this sin.
Yes.
And we can all relate to that.
Yes.
And so David has done amazing things in writing.
Yes. And in fact, whenever you go back to, I want to say it's in Chronicles, maybe. I'm not sure. Where it actually mentions, could be in Exodus. Exodus or Leviticus, now that I'm thinking of it, where God designed people. He ideally designed people to both write lyrics, to write music, to create instruments. Do y'all remember where those are said? It literally goes through this whole paragraph of this family, God designed them to write lyrics, and then this one to write music, and this one to make the instruments, and then this one to do this. So you have these pockets of families that these people didn't write the lyrics, but they wrote the music. How many times have you, I did this with a cappella years and years ago, because I have this strange curiosity about who writes what and who did the music. And so it would say, so-and-so wrote the music, so-and-so did the words. And sometimes it's the same person that does both. So David was a lyricist, and he wrote this stuff. And it's amazing, to Doug's point, how much this stuff connects to us, and we can really grasp and understand. How many songs do you guys know where whenever you're listening to the song, I mean, it's like it just goes right to a need that you have, and you can sit there and just swim in that song. I was listening to one yesterday, and it just connected with me in a very, very cool way. So David, there's some sin here, and he feels very disconnected from God. A second thing, again to Doug's point, is both here and in Psalm 51, we walk on this journey with David. Obviously maybe not the same sin, but an error, something where we're missing it. And we can connect with David I need the same thing. God, I need you to come back. I need to regain my relationship. I need something. And so we can really connect with what David is saying. So notice at the very outset here, there's this sin that is there. For whatever reason, it's not stated. And then what is if either the first or the second thing that David reaches out to God for? Very initially in verse 2. What is his first request? Well, maybe his second request. I need your compassion. Just see me as David, see me as your son, see me as, someone very important to you. Have compassion on me. And the New Testament word, which is used often with Jesus, this idea of compassion is, I kind of relate it to whether it's a child or a grandchild. If your child or your grandchild has a need, and they come to you with that need. And I, of course, envision, Mateo. He may yell out my name, Papa, Papa, and I come and he's like, Papa, this is this and this is that, and oh my goodness, and man, I am in. I am engaged, and whatever the need is, he's got everything in that moment. Whatever he needs, I'm there. And so David is calling on Yahweh here, have compassion on me. Why? Why is he asking for the compassion? I am weak.
I like
yeah.
the way he translates
Yeah.
languish.
I am languishing.
That takes it to a deeper level.
Yeah. The NIV says, I am faint. Have mercy on me, for I am faint. So really in this psalm, what is David's condition? Why is he even wanting to connect here to the Lord? I'm going to start saying the Lord because y'all are familiar with that. We don't use Yahweh a lot. Yeah, he really is. I mean, he's not having a good day because of what he did. Now, one of the real cool things here that maybe sometimes we struggle doing is David is fully aware of his error. He is fully aware that God didn't do it, Bathsheba didn't do it, his sons didn't do it, Israel's not bad, man, this is all David. He did this. And so as he lays there in this condition, have mercy on me, Lord. I'm faint. I'm languishing. I am weak. I need you to. And in fact, when he states the last part of verse 2, heal me, restore me, Lord. My bones are in agony.
There's been some distance from
Yeah.
the original sin, whatever that
Yeah, whatever that was.
because he does say, how long? How long?
Yeah, yeah,
Allow me to suffer like this.
yeah,
When is this going to end?
yeah,
So there does appear to be some time
yeah,
behind this.
yeah,
I also
Yeah.
don't think this is, I think it's likely that it's not about Bathsheba, because he talks about his enemies here, rather than his own. The last stanzas talks about, my enemies take note.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know that, I don't know, that kind of, yeah, very interesting. So maybe without making a comment, how many times have you found yourself in this place where you're just like, man, God, I maybe not even messed up. God, I'm just in a bad place because of my decisions, because of what I have done. And I've been away from you for too long. When are we going to make this right? Yes.
God's always willing to do that. It's us
Yes.
that creates that distance.
Yes.
Us and our guilt and our
Yes.
whatever.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's why there's a little bit of this that I don't know I would use the word confuses me, but I know for me in my theology, it's literally snap of a finger. God, I need to be restored. You know, it's done. So maybe for David, this is, like we ourselves do, walking through his own guilt, his own agony, whatever it may be, and what he feels like he did to the Lord. And I'm ready to come back, and it's more of what's happening in David than obviously what's happening with the Lord, because God's ready at any time. Yeah.
Piggyback off of Bob's comment, the Jews had a very keen sense of right and wrong and the consequences thereof. Deuteronomy is very clear that if you do what I say, it will go well to you and bless. But if you don't do what I say, it's not going to go well to you.
Right.
And I think David maybe is related to that. The whole thing about the enemies, I think he feels like he's being oppressed by enemies, possibly because of something that he has done.
Yeah.
And would like it to be taken away now so that he can, his enemies can suffer in shame or be dealt with or whatever. And be done with all this.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a connection between the sin and the enemies that are oppressing.
Yeah. And also remember, which once I was made aware of this, it kind of bleeds into a lot of the stuff that I see, that it can be very easy for us to, as modern day, Christians, Western Christians, that when we come into this, we bring the cross and we bring the resurrection and we bring New Testament theology and all those kind of ideas, which weren't here. And yes, they had the temple and they had the sacrifices, they had all those things, but there was no, necessarily forgiveness of sins. There was no cross. There was no Messiah. There wasn't any of those things. So it's very possible, in terms of how Yahweh was viewed, was different. Yeah.
Also, seems like their consequences for their sins were more direct.
Yeah.
Like we can have consequences for stuff we've done that are like a natural consequence, but like in David's case with Bathsheba, he was told, your son's going to die.
Yeah.
He knew, because I did this, my son's going to die. Where we, like you said, we have the forgiveness of sins, so we see
Right,
We might
right.
not even relate a consequence
Right,
that's happened
right. Yeah,
to our direct sin,
yeah,
we should, but we
yeah,
don't
like a
feel-
visible consequence.
Like if he did something wrong and a bunch of his troops were slaughtered
Yeah,
because of
yeah,
his decision,
yeah.
he would see it immediately.
Yeah, yeah. As would the families of, that, it's interesting you say that. I was watching a movie a while back, and it was bringing up the idea that whenever you would go, two armies fight, and even if one won, they may lose half their men. And you're like, oh, well, that's got to be terrible. Terrible? You lose half your working force. Women lose husbands, kids lose dads, and you lose a lot because you don't have a Walmart to go to. It was a very, very different time in terms of, so they had these effects very quickly. Dad didn't come home.
Than we do.
Yeah,
Because in the back of our
right,
minds, we're like, oh, look, we can always be forgiven.
right.
You know,
Well, but I think the both sides of that, if we walk in the light as He is in the light, we have fellowship, sins are forgiven, which is good. We need to take that very seriously. On the other side, we could take a little advantage of that we do a sin, whatever the error is, and it's like, well, I'm walking in the light, and not that we take advantage of it, but it's there, and so we don't see visibly, viscerally, that. Well, and how many laws were there that if you are, I'm going to say irreverent, I can't think of the other word, disrespectful to a parent over and over again, or other serious things, they take you out to the edge of town and stone you. Yeah.
Maybe we would feel differently too if we had to actually see the blood sacrifice and kill
Yeah.
the animal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
make sin maybe a little bit more in your face.
I was also listening to a podcast about that very thing, and they were like, we have missed the bloody, visible, what that was like to kill the lamb and to, drain the blood and all of the stuff, and that's why priests had to wash their hands, and it was a very, very visible scene. Yeah.
One of the things I have to remember when I read the Psalms is because, the punishment seems direct, but they hadn't developed the concept of heaven and hell yet.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't that you're going to burn in hell forever. It happened right then.
Yeah. And I know I've mentioned that a couple times, but these ideas of heaven, hell, and eternity, the whole afterlife. In fact, whenever you get to verse 5, which we're obviously not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it's very interesting that David brings this up, because when he says, "Turn, Lord, and deliver me, save me because of your unfailing love," I mean, among the people that have already gone on, no one's proclaiming your name. Who's going to praise you in Sheol? They're gone. They're dead. But it's not a eternity. It's not a heaven or hell. It's just simply they're there. Nobody praises you there, at least from David's standpoint. No one does anything there. And there's no good or bad. There's not, Ahab, man, we know where he went. Well, that's a Western Christian idea. They didn't think that then, at least as far as I understand. They didn't have those concepts yet. And in fact, those concepts are fairly new in terms of the last couple of centuries. Yeah.
Death was a separation from God.
Yes.
They understood that. The guard, the event in the garden that started this whole thing was basically that. Death came through that sin.
Yeah.
And we see it in Romans 5, right? Death came through Adam. And so they understood that death was the separation from God. And Hades, Sheol, was a place where there was no God. God wasn't there. His presence wasn't there. You can't worship him. He's not there.
He's not there.
And so I think they had those concepts. Now maybe
Right, but everybody who died went there.
Yeah.
Everybody who
Yeah.
died went there.
Yeah, and two, though, I have wondered for a very long time, and I have not been able to get a good answer, for me anyway, until recently, and I preached on it a couple of weeks ago. What was death in Genesis 3? Because they didn't die, and they didn't lose their relationship with God. Now, did it change? Yes, but it didn't die. It just, well, it was a, the word there is the same idea as the rich man Lazarus. There's a chasm. There's a departure. They're separated. Yeah. And so the separation is, yeah, they're separated. So I guess, at least for me, my point is that the way we view this stuff today is generally not how they viewed it then. And that's why David says, no one among the dead proclaims your name. Who gives you praise in Sheol? So what might his point be here in terms of nothing is reverent to you in Sheol? The dead are gone. Why do you think he would bring that up? Yeah.
It seems to me that David is saying, if you send me to Sheol,
Yeah.
I can't praise
Yes.
you.
Yes.
I can't proclaim your name.
Yes.
I can't do these things.
Yes.
If I'm in Sheol.
Yes.
That's
So if that is the case, where is David's mind and his attitude and his thoughts right now?
Don't kill me.
Don't kill me. Seriously. I mean, he is low. Have you ever had one of those days where you're just, I mean, not maybe don't kill me, but man, life's rough right now. And it's my fault, but it's rough. And God, I need you to rebreathe your life back into my bones. If this is the case, and I'm not sure because I didn't specifically look at this word, but in Genesis 1, the spirit that's on the face of the deep and how God animates the first human is the same word. Spirit, soul, and breath are all the same Hebrew word. And so here, when he's saying my soul is in deep anguish, my breath, my animation, my life, I'm hurting because of what I did. And how long, and I don't think he's necessarily asking God this. I think he's saying, God, how long am I going to allow myself to be in this situation? Notice what he says in verse 4, and in verse 4. I need you to deliver me. I need you to reanimate me. Save me because of your unfailing love. I don't want to go where I can't praise you. I really like that point, Doug. I can't do that.
I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
But in ESV it says, "Turn, O Lord, live my life."
Oh, okay.
I wonder if that's the same word
Yeah.
used for repent. He's basically calling on God to repent.
Yeah.
Turn
Oh.
and change him. I wonder. I'm just speculating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems
Yeah.
to me like he's trying to get God to change his mind.
Right.
Yeah.
We're like,
Yeah.
there's only 10 people left. What do you say?
Which is a really, really cool discussion because, growing up, one of the things that I found very odd in our theology is, we talk about that God is unchanging and he's always the same and all these kind of ideas. And yet we have these stories of, in Genesis 6, God repented of making man, and therefore the flood comes. And then he changed his mind-ish with, Abram and the whatever, with Moses and Israel. On and on we have these ideas. And I'm not saying those things contradict at all. I'm saying it's interesting how on one side God is unchanging. On the other hand, that God can flip. God can, repent. He can change. He can alter course, whatever the case may be.
He will turn his
Yes.
You're having
Yes.
those
Yes.
case, they exist
Yes.
as intercessors. Of course,
Yes. It's an advocate.
praying
It's
through Jesus, who is
an attorney, so to speak. Yes. 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 Kind of a foresight of that.
I think it's interesting,
Yeah.
looking to the New Testament in Hebrews 11.
Okay.
The faithful.
Yeah,
They didn't
yeah.
know what was to come.
Yeah.
They just, by faith, they obeyed God.
Right.
And they didn't know about what they could look forward to at that point.
Right. They didn't know 5 steps ahead, but they knew God was going to be there.
They had faith,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they were
Yeah.
obedient. I think that's a good thing, too. We may
Yeah.
not have complete understanding about things, but we have to have that faith also.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, what does David seem to be having here about Yahweh is that I know you're going to do something, at least it seems to imply that. I just don't know when. I don't know when you're going to reanimate me. I don't know when this is going to happen. Verse 6, I'm worn out from my groaning. But whatever he would call faith, he seems to have that here because there is a relationship. And I know that you do love me. And so this position that he is in, do this because of your unfailing love. All night long I flood my bed with weeping and drench my couch with tears. My eyes grow weak with sorrow. They fail because of all my foes or all my enemies. Away from me, all you who do evil, for Yahweh has heard my weeping. Isn't that cool? He knows that and to Susan's point, he knows. He has the faith. He has the confidence. Yahweh hears me. He's listening to me. He accepts my prayer. So how does David end this in terms of all the things that he's asking the Lord to do? How does he end this? All my enemies will be overwhelmed with shame and anguish. They will turn back and suddenly be put to shame. What does he believe ultimately that the Lord's going to do? The Lord's going to answer him. Yeah, he's going to reanimate him. He's going to re-strengthen him. And I think there's a great lesson here. Sometimes that, I don't know, sometimes, with parenting approaches, if every time your kid is in a problematic situation and you what is now the term helicopter in, and you save them, you fix it for them, then you're actually hurting them, you're harming them because they can't go through that challenge and learn the lessons that maybe they need to learn. And so God allows David to sit through this. He allows David to be faint, to be in agony, to be in anguish. He allows David to need to call out to God as opposed to God just doing it. He allows that calling out. Deliver me. Your unfailing love is there, and I know it's there. And whether that was going to happen or not, to Doug's point a while back, if I die, I can't praise you. I can't be reverent towards you. And so, very, 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 very interesting psalm here from David, actually kind of a short one. And I think a lot of these types of psalms give us a lot of encouragement of how we are able to go before the Lord. I don't know what your prayer life is like, but I know for me, oftentimes as I talk to people about it, that reverence looks like this. Dear Heavenly Father, and then there's these pockets of things we have to do, but I can't tell him how I really feel, and I can't be upset, and all these different ideas that we have. And yet, David here is just opening up his heart to God. What he needs from him, not even what he believes he'll do, just what he needs from him. And calling on his love, calling on the relationship that they have. And in the end, believing that God will come through for him.
Yeah, he did believe that God was going to do this work because it's very clear there at the end.
Yeah.
He knows God has heard his prayer. He believes that he's going to answer his prayer. And it's interesting, too, that he says that may my enemies be troubled.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
Take that.
Yes. Apply what I'm going through to my enemies. Yeah, that's interesting. And may they, well, and again, without overdoing this, David doesn't say, at least in the translations we have, may this happen to my enemies. What does he say? This will happen to my enemies. God is going to take care of this in some way, and they will be put to shame. But in the process, whatever David did, he's learned from it, and he's ready to transform. He's ready to be a different man. And that process is because God allowed him to go through this. Well, I'd say God allowed. God was there watching him struggle, be in agony and hurt, and all those kind of things. And I bring up kids because it wasn't so much with my kids, but man, with Mateo, holy cow, when he's hurting, I really have to work hard at letting him go through the process, because I just want to swoop in and make it better, and that's not always good for him. Oftentimes it's not good for him. And oftentimes, as we go through challenges in life, God is not going to swoop in and fix it. He wants us to go through that struggle and that challenge. Yeah.
I don't know if this happened before or after Bathsheba, but he brought sackcloth and
Yeah.
mourned when God said his son would die.
Yeah.
But he, it seems to me like he wanted God to change his mind
Oh, yeah.
and kind of
Yeah.
grieved, hoping maybe God would change his mind, but when
Yeah.
he didn't, and his son died. Well, David didn't abandon God. A lot of people would.
Yeah.
You didn't answer my
Yeah.
prayer, so,
Right.
you know.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if this happened after, he's still trusting that God's going to come through.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and with his son, that was something he did, and it was another life. This was him personally. And I'm not over-explaining what you said. It's interesting to me that this was something he did, himself, as opposed to another life that got taken because of, and I don't know, it just now occurred to me, that's probably why he went through what he did, is another life got snuffed out because of his selfishness, because of his actions. So.
Because he mourned while he was alive.
Yeah.
And then the mourning stops once he died, which kind of seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Ironic, but he
Yeah.
explains why.
Yeah.
It's like, I tried. I was trying to basically change God's mind.
Yeah.
God said
Yeah.
no.
And in that moment, God said no.
And so
In that
it's over
instance.
now. And I'm back to doing what I do.
Gonna move on. Yep. All righty. Well, next week we will get into another psalm like this and move forward.